Hello, this is Vickie Hoffman from North Union Local Schools, and I am here to interview Meri Skilliter from Ada Local School District. So, Meri, tell us a little bit about yourself and your current position so that we can kind of get know you a little bit better.
Sure. I am nearing my first anniversary with Ada Schools. I started on January 1 of 2017, so I'm finally going to be past the first of everything here. Before I came here, though, I was at Macomb Local Schools in Hancock County for 3.5 years as their superintendent. Prior to that, I spent 8 years in the Gibsonburg district in Sandusky County as an elementary principal, and then my first career job was 13 years as an elementary teacher in Bluffton Local Schools.
Okay, so tell us about some of the exciting things you're working on right now.
Probably the most exciting thing that's happening here at Ada is we've revamped our business, social studies, and technology departments to start to integrate more STEM instruction and offer more basic engineering and coding and some of those sorts of things in a STEM program. And we've been involved with the OSRC, so we have some different professional development opportunities for our STEM teachers. And it's been really, really fun to watch the kids grow in those courses, and that teacher is just flourishing teaching that. And so that's been one of our exciting changes this year that we're really proud of, and we're continuing to envision what that might look like for us down the future. So that's our big project right now.
Okay, so that you talked a little bit about the vision in the future. So tell me what your vision is for Ada or for just Ohio in general for education.
When I stepped in the doors, actually before I even stepped in the doors, when I was doing research on this district, the district's mission statement was the best mission statement I'd ever read in any school ever. And the mission statement is aspiring to excel in all aspects of the school experience. And I think that sums up perfectly what I've always been about. Last week, I was lucky enough to hear somebody say, "We're so glad we have a superintendent that supports athletics." And 2 days later, somebody say, "We're so glad we have a superintendent that supports the arts." We just try to make as many opportunities for our kids that will make them better people when they graduate. And we try to do all the things that we try to do with excellence.
Was there a role model who inspired you along the way? So tell us a little bit about that person, what qualities they had that inspired you.
Oh, sure. Several female leaders that I knew, school leaders that I knew. One was Carol Oxley, was at the Lima City Schools. I had the privilege, really, to work with her. My husband and I are involved with school crisis response in this area, and she called us when Lima City was having a school crisis, but I watched her, and I've always seen her on TV because that's a big position in this area, and I just always loved how she could lead and still be female and feminine and lead from her strengths. And I just aspired to be that kind of person that made everybody feel like the most important person in the room and who was a champion for everything that the city schools did, despite how city schools are looked upon or how the state was measuring them. She was still championing and cheerleading all the great things that were happening within her district.
Oh, that's a great role model.
She is still.
So in a field that's dominated by mainly females, why are there so few female leaders?
That's a great, great question. Probably because it stinks sometimes. And I think that women approach leadership differently than men do, obviously. And we're not as good at compartmentalizing things, and so there's a lot of spotlight on you and a lot of criticism all the time, and we take those things, I think, as women very much to heart and can get disheartened and feel like failures if we're not good at championing ourselves and taking care of ourselves and that sort of thing. I think that's part of it. I think that women are finding their leadership in non-traditional leadership roles, like in central offices, in curriculum, in coaching, and that sort of thing, more than they're aspiring necessarily to be superintendents per se. And I don't think that everybody that does it stays there because of the challenges for women, I think.
Absolutely. So what do you feel are the differences in the way male and female leaders are perceived?
It's interesting that you asked that. I was helping the ESC interview for an interim superintendent, one of the ESCs that we work with. And during one of the interviews with one of the female candidates, somebody described the candidate as intense. And that word intense had this negative connotation. But I think a man that's intense is looked at as driven and strong, and maybe it's more of a negative connotation for women. And so that's certainly just a challenge of what's seen as positive traits in women versus positive traits in men. And I think that we as women, we have to lead from our strengths and trust our guts, that we're not going to do it the way the neighbor superintendent does it, but it's okay, because we're going to lead with the things that make us powerful.
So what do you recommend to motivate or influence students to pursue a career in education?
Wow, for a while I would have said I didn't encourage it. I think in the last 6 to 8 years, all of the initiatives that happened all at once were very frustrating and kind of got in the way of progress, in my opinion. And so I think for a time I probably wouldn't have encouraged anyone, but and none of my children chose it, although 2 of them have chosen educators to marry, so there must be something to it. But I just encourage people who really, really love working with children, people who, seem like born leaders, born teachers, to really pursue it from the standpoint of you have to choose a profession where your passion is, or you'll be unhappy. And if you're unhappy, you're doing a disservice to children. It's, you can be unhappy in an accounting job and you're not really hurting a whole lot of people, but the most precious resource is in the hands of educators. So if you're not happy, you're not producing, then you're really doing harm.
What do you think is different about the female perspective that you bring to leadership?
Well, it's interesting because some of my background is in public safety. I've run EMS as a volunteer in my community for 27 years, and my husband's a police officer. And it's not necessarily innate for females to have that background. So I just bring that as my personal experience into it. But I think that female leaders really pay attention to relationships and relationship building. It's inherent for most of us to build relationships, to encourage, to mother. A lot of times I think, I have a very young staff here in Ada, and a lot of times I think of myself as mothering them. And sometimes that's making sure they take care of themselves, and sometimes it's tough love, but coming from a place of wanting them to be successful and wanting them to be happy and that sort of thing. So a lot of times my mothering instinct is good for me as a leader, and I bring that kind of piece to the table. And all leadership, no matter if you're a man or a woman, is about building relationships. But I think that many women have the strength in building relationships and understand its importance and make it a priority.
I agree with you. What should a female educator do today to become tomorrow's school leader?
That's a great question, especially with me having these 2 girls in our lives now that are just starting out as teachers. I think that if you're going to be the leader of teachers, you have to hone the craft. I think you have to spend time in the classroom, and I think that my time as a principal was invaluable to me, having a larger perspective, thinking about an organization more globally and all of the stakeholder pieces of it. When I was a teacher, most of my stakeholders were in my classroom every day and those parents. But when you become an administrator, you realize the teachers are also stakeholders and the community is stakeholders, and learning that global perspective of when you do something or when somebody does something in the organization, how it impacts the whole organization. So you just have to study your craft and become good at it, and have role models, have people that you look up to that you think are good and study them. Be mentored by the best people possible, ask questions about people's leadership style and decisions and that sort of thing. That's where I came into the administrative world was from just studying my craft and then studying others that were good at doing what I wanted to be good at.
There is a lot to learn in watching other people.
There is.
A lot.
Maybe sometimes what not to do also.
That's
I think
true.
I had some of those administrators, and they were probably equally good, if not better, for me as an administrator to say, I don't want to be that. So what does that not look like? Too. I think there's something to that as well.
I agree with you. So tell me why you value OSRC.
It's really interesting how we came about that. I was at an advocacy meeting with a senator with a bunch of superintendents, and one approached me, and he was aware that I had a leader here that was very involved in tech and very good at tech, and was also a building principal, and asked if I thought he would be interested. And I have not been here that long, so I didn't know if he would be. So I came back and I talked to him a little bit about it, and I don't think even then I understood what we were getting into, and I mean that in a good way. And he didn't understand what we were getting into, but now that we're involved, there's a great connectedness with all of these members of OSRC, plus all of the partners that they bring to the table through that connectedness, different organizations, agencies, companies that have skill sets and resources and professional development opportunities and that sort of thing for us to connect with and learn from depending on what our goals are. So I really think the biggest part of OSRC is that connectedness of knowing where all the resources are and bringing the resources that the schools in big cities kind of organically have through being in big cities with lots of resources, and bringing those kinds of resources to our little tiny schools that get forgotten or in the middle of nowhere. That's definitely been the biggest advantage to being an OSRC, and it's really opened our eyes to possibilities. Plus, we're hearing from other schools that are involved in the neat things they're doing, and we're able to visit and pick brains and network and be mentored by them as well. So we're just getting to see more of what we could possibly be.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Meri. I'm more than impressed by you and your district, and I appreciate
Thank you.
letting us get to know you a little bit better.
Glad to do it. Thank you.